A new survey shows the number of Singapore residents living in HDB flats has fallen for the first time in almost 2 decades.
Unveiling the Green Plan, Singapore sets ambitious targets over the next decade to make the city a greener, more livable home.
It's the funniest thing we've seen in a while. An American lawyer goes viral after he couldn't turn off a cat filter during a court hearing.
Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
I'm Haryanto Dimana. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
The number of Singapore residents living in HDB flats has dipped for the first time since 2003.
But the number of HDB households continues to climb, meaning there are fewer people living in each household.
Another reason is there are more single households.
According to the latest HDB sample household survey, a total of 3.04 million residents lived in HDB flats in 2018. Now that is compared to 3.06 million in 2013. They made up 1.01 million households, up from 910,000 5 years ago.
Well, the survey findings also revealed that residents who live in smaller HDB flats are more likely to have aspirations for better housing, like a bigger flat, private property, or a purchased flat instead of a rented one. Such aspirations are also the most prevalent among younger HDB residents, with more than 70% of those below 35 years old who wanted to do so.
Meanwhile, close to 80% of elderly HDB residents, 65 years old and above, said they are content with their flat type.
Well, moving on, public transport ridership fell last year as expected amid the pandemic, which forced many to work from home. The decline ended a trend of consecutive increases in the previous 15 years.
The Land Transport Authority said today that average daily ridership for buses and trains fell 34.5% to 5.04 million, an 11-year low. It has raised questions about the financial sustainability of the network, which was designed with pre-pandemic usage in mind.
Well, we can look forward to a greener Singapore by 2030 with new sustainability initiatives launched today.
The Singapore Green Plan 2030, which was released by 5 ministries, will chart the way towards a more sustainable future over the next decade. The wide-ranging plan cuts across all sectors of society, ranging from infrastructural development, research and innovation to training programs.
Well, in a 15-minute video, ministers helming the 5 ministries shared details of the Green Plan, which have 5 pillars supporting it.
By 2030, Singapore will be a green and beautiful city in nature. We will set aside 50% more land, around 200 hectares, for nature parks. Every household will live within a 10-minute walk of a park. We will plant 1 million more trees across our island, which will sequester another 78,000 tons of CO2. Singaporeans will enjoy cleaner air and cooler shade.
Sustainability is also about you and me and the way we live. We aim to be a zero-waste nation powered by a circular economy with a high rate of recycling so that our precious resources can be used many times over. We have already closed our water loop by recycling our used water to make new water. We will make a similar strong push towards circularity in waste materials to transform trash to treasure. We will turn incinerated waste into new sand and use this for construction. We will build up Singapore's recycling capabilities by sorting better and reducing contamination. By 2030, we aim to reduce the waste sent to our landfill by 30%.
By 2030, our MRT network will be comparable in coverage to major cities like London and New York City. We will develop new town concepts, such as Tengah, which will have the first car-free HDB town centre, with roads constructed underground, freeing up surface spaces for public transport, activities, and green spaces. At the same time, we will encourage walking, cycling, and active mobility. We have announced the plans to expand the cycling network We will actively do more to repurpose roads and implement pedestrianization wherever possible.
These environmentally friendly habits will take time to take root in our society. We must inculcate them early in our young, through education. We will start an eco-stewardship program involving all schools from primary to pre-U levels. As part of the program, we aim to reduce carbon emissions from the school sector significantly. We will get some of our schools to be carbon neutral by 2030, with the rest to follow thereafter.
Geographical constraints limit our options for renewable energy. We do not have great rivers for hydropower. We have neither land or sea space for large solar or wind farms.
We can also use 15% less energy in HDB towns by 2030 through measures such as the widespread use of smart LED lights and solar energy. And beyond HDB towns, we will green 80% of all buildings over the next decade and develop eco-friendly districts as demonstration projects that we can scale up, such as the Jurong Lake District. Singapore's urban environment makes us an ideal city for adopting electric vehicles, or EVs.
As sustainability grows in importance and consumers pivot towards greener and more sustainable products and services, it can become a key competitive advantage for us and present new opportunities for growth and job creation. We are therefore seeking new investments that are among the best in class in terms of carbon and energy efficiency.
Against rising sea levels, we're developing new solutions and a better understanding of our coastlines. We will put in place the physical defences to protect our coastlines along the East Coast, around Lim Chu Kang, Sungai Ketut, and Jurong Island. We will moderate the rise in urban heat by increasing greenery and piloting the use of cool paint on building facades. We are increasing local food production to make our food supply more resilient.
Well, the Green Plan was first mentioned by Minister for Sustainability and the Environment, Grace Fu, in Parliament on February the 1st.
This following a robust debate over a motion filed by 6 MPs calling on Singapore to deepen and speed up efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change.
Well, let's find out more about this Green Plan with Science and Environment correspondent Audrey Tan. Hey Audrey, so how is the Green Plan different from previous initiatives? For example, the Sustainable Singapore Blueprint.
Yeah, so you're right in that national targets for sustainability initiatives have been set in Singapore before. The last was the SSB in 2015. There are a couple of overlaps between the two of them. So for SSB 2015 and this one, we have seen targets set for nature ways, cycling paths. So the infrastructure stuff are kind of the same in both times. But the latest Green Plan also includes things that were not really part of the Sustainable Singapore Blueprint. There's a lot of focus on like carbon neutrality, carbon emissions for one. This is something that's not reflected in the Sustainable Singapore Blueprint. And also a lot of other things related to how people behave, for instance, like there are plans for 75% mass public transport target for 75% of people to take their transport on public transport, for instance, and also some things along those lines.
Right. And under this plan, we'll progressively see tangible infrastructure changes like more solar panels, greener buildings and schools and so on. But what about the quantifiable markers for intangible results?
So I mean, having a marker to see how people have changed is a bit more difficult. But as I mentioned earlier, now there's a target to achieve 75% of transport being done on bus and through rail. So that is probably one of them. The Green Plan also includes programs to increase people's awareness. So there's a new eco-stewardship program that's supposed to be launched in schools, and also training programs to help SMEs develop capabilities in the sustainability sector. So it's very hard for me to give you guys an idea of, what are possible markers for this kind of intangible transitions, but we'll have to wait and see for more details to be released during the budget debates.
I see. Well, 5 ministries involved, so it's a whole of government approach, really. Do you foresee any potential roadblocks, though, in this ambitious plan?
No, I think as the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us, I think the government working together has the capability of achieving what they set out to achieve. But there are still, it's very hard to see what are the possible challenges that could arise. But I just want to point out that, from when Sustainable Singapore Blueprint was rolled out in 2015 and now a lot of things have happened. So you have the COVID-19 pandemic, you have had growing global awareness about climate change. You have also seen Singapore setting out its target to achieve net zero emissions as soon as possible. So there's a lot of new developments in this space that has happened since 2015. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's how and whether Singapore achieves its targets also depends on a lot of other factors like developments in technology, things that happen globally. And, end of this year, there's supposed to be the UN climate conference where we set up an international carbon market, or discussions on this international carbon market will be discussed. So there's a lot of moving parts. But based on things that is within Singapore's control, like infrastructural targets and all that, I'm pretty sure that we can set out to achieve those things. The things that are a bit probably up in the air will be about establishing Singapore as a carbon services hub, because it depends on how and whether the global carbon market is established and so on.
Audrey, while we see this push from the government, what each of us can do also contributes to a greener Singapore. So how does the Green Plan address changes on an individual level, like shifting mindsets and encouraging eco-friendly habits?
So one of the programs I can think of the top of my head, looking at the Green Plan today, is that there's going to be a new eco-stewardship program in the schools. And also in schools, I think there are plans to increase things related to sustainability that's inculcated in students there. But in other sectors, I guess there's also a focus on sustainability as a new engine of growth, and that may spur people's interest to find out more about what are the job availability in this space, and that could, change things. But I think right now it's still too early to see.
Thank you for sharing the details, Audrey. We've been speaking to Science and Environment correspondent Audrey Tan. You can read all about this 10-year Green Plan at straitstimes.com.
An update on the COVID-19 situation here. A dormitory resident was among the 15 new cases reported today.
The remaining 14 were imported and placed on stay-home notice when they arrived in Singapore. More details will be released tonight.
Well, meanwhile, Indian restaurant chain The Banana Leaf Apollo will be charged in court on February 17th for breaching multiple safe management measures.
These included failing to ensure group gatherings didn't exceed the cap allowed, not enforcing at least 1 meter distance between seated customers, and for providing a self-service buffet.
11 other F&B outlets were also penalized for breaches. Of these, 6 outlets have been ordered to close, including Zam Zam at North Bridge Road, as well as Wang Zi Music Restaurant and Ding Garden, which are both at New Bridge Road.
4 other outlets were fined $1,000 each. Another was fined $2,000 for repeat offences of seating groups of diners less than 1 meter apart. 29 people were also fined for breaching safe management measures at F&B premises.
73 more people were fined $300 each for flouting safe management measures in parks and beaches. In Changi Beach Park alone, 39 people were caught breaking rules, including a group of 17 who gathered together.
In an exclusive with the Straits Times, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, said critical global issues like climate change, job rescaling and food security will be discussed when the WEF meets in Singapore in August.
The meeting comes as the world is preparing for a reset in the pandemic's aftermath. So the focus of discussions will be also on continuing efforts to fight COVID-19 as well as on economic recovery.
Professor Schwab also said hosting the meeting in Singapore is a reflection of the growing importance of Asia and ASEAN. The meeting here will mark only the second time that is being held anywhere else besides Davos. In 2002, WEF took the meeting to New York in an act of solidarity after the 9/11 terror attacks.
2021 will be the first year where the GDP of Asia in terms of purchasing power will exceed quite substantially the GDP of the rest of the world. So it's also a kind of demonstration of the geopolitical and geoeconomic importance this region has acquired over the last decades. And I also feel when we look at power centers in the world, we usually speak, rightly so, about China and the US, maybe Europe, but actually the ASEAN region is the fastest, fundamentally, the fastest growing region in the world.
You can watch the full exclusive interview at straitstimes.com. It's on our YouTube channel as well.
We know property is probably the most valuable asset families will ever own. Many jointly own their homes, but a considerable number also have a home in their sole names.
Then there are parents who jointly buy HDB flats or other units with their children, especially when the kids are not married.
That's why it's prudent to know how the law governs real estate ownership, especially in cases involving legacy and property transfers. It's something Invest editor Tan Wee Boon wrote about this past weekend.
So let's talk about some circumstances of property ownership with him. Wee Boon, so I live with my mother and older brother who are joint owners of our house. Now, when my mom passes away and the three of us are still living together, what are my options?
Okay, in Singapore, property transactions are governed by the Land Titles Act. So in cases of joint property ownership, the surviving owner will become the sole owner when the other owner passes on. So in this case, if a parent and son are the joint owners, the son will become the sole owner after the parent passes on. So in your case, a prudent way to handle this matter is to have a family discussion when everyone is still around. So if your mom's intention is to also include you in the home, the best way is to put your name in as a joint owner too. There will be some stamp duty payable, but it is still worth doing so to protect your interest in the home. So what this means is that eventually you and your brother will become the joint owners of the home. Otherwise, you may well end up as the only person who does not have a home later on.
Well, Wee Boon, here's another scenario. Let's say my husband and I own our flat and I will my share to charity. So if my husband still wants to live in that house, what does he need to do?
Again, this is why many people get caught. In a joint ownership, you cannot just will away your share of the property. The only way you can do that is to break up the shares of the ownership by making an application under the Land Titles Act. Unless you do that, when you are gone, your husband will just become the sole owner of the property. Your half cannot be willed away unless you apply to break the property into a 50-50 share. And to do that, you will also need his consent. If one party disagrees, that's when the fight starts. This is why I said in my feature that it is paramount for families to make plans well ahead to avoid unnecessary dispute, which can actually be avoided in most cases. So in the case of charities, I strongly urge people to try to do it when they're still alive rather than wait until they are gone. In this case, you may will your half away to charity, but it will not happen unless you outlive your husband, which means that you will also get his half too. So if the idea is to do charity, do it now rather than wait for years for something that may or may not happen, as this depends really on who is the last person standing.
And so we've just discussed two hypothetical scenarios. They could be quite common, but what are other situations that would cause contention?
Frankly, if you don't make any plans at all, everything can and will be contentious. Not just properties, people also fight over monies in bank accounts. One common thing that parents like to do is this. If they have a property, they may like to pass it on to their kids in equal shares. So assuming you have 4 kids, you think everybody will be happy to own a quarter share of the house? It means that no one gets to have a say unless, if everyone is close, this is a fight waiting to happen. After all, you cannot sell a quarter of a share in an open market, and you are basically stuck unless your sibling buy the share from you. People also forget that in Singapore, we have this word that is dreaded by property owners, and that is ABSD, the additional stamp duty for second property, which is 12% right now. So even if your siblings want to buy your quarter share, they also have to pay this 12% if they already own properties. This is why in such cases, a better alternative is perhaps to sell the house and divide the proceeds equally, which may be more useful. After all, no one will be unhappy to receive money, right?
Well, thanks as always, Wee Boon. Good tips for all. That was our Invest editor, Tan Wee Boon, and you can read his feature at straitstimes.com, but you have to be a subscriber.
A quick look at the global headlines. Anti-coup protesters in Myanmar returned to Naypyidaw streets today, a day after the most violent demonstrations yet, where a woman was shot in the head. She's in critical condition and is not expected to survive. 3 other people were being treated for wounds from suspected rubber bullets in yesterday's protests.
Moving stateside, the US will scrutinize data from a World Health Organization report released yesterday that the COVID-19 virus didn't originate in a Wuhan lab. The report ruled out a laboratory leak and indicated that bats remain the likely cause. It also said that transmission via frozen food is a possibility to be further investigated. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said yesterday that the Biden administration wants to independently review the WHO's findings, adding that even though the US has rejoined the organization, it's imperative to have their own experts on the ground.
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can
now,
see that.
Having a cat lawyer sounds like a scene straight out of a sitcom. But here's Rod Ponton, an attorney from Texas, who couldn't turn off the cat filter during a hearing over Zoom yesterday. This viral clip showed Mr. Ponton and his assistant struggling to remove the filter, while others on the call tried to remain impassive about the situation. The moment that drew the most laughs was when Mr. Ponton says he's not a cat. Well, obviously. Now, he said he only found out about this clip after getting calls from reporters. He took the situation in good spirits, saying, quote, "If I can make the country chuckle for a moment in these difficult times they're going through, I'm happy to let them do that at my expense."
Well, back home in her Chinese New Year message, President Halimah Yacob said she understood how difficult it will be to celebrate it this year with COVID-19 restrictions.
But she hoped Singaporeans will still be able to spend time meaningfully with their loved ones. Madam Halimah also encouraged all Singaporeans to get vaccinated against COVID-19.
We are entering the year of the ox with the greatest sense of hope and optimism, because we now have the vaccine to combat COVID-19. However, having the vaccine is only one part of the equation. What is of equal importance is to make sure that everyone is vaccinated. The response has been encouraging, but we can do even better. So please get vaccinated to protect yourselves and your loved ones.
For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Now, we'd like to wish everyone a happy Lunar New Year and a good, safe, long weekend. Sing Nian Kuai Le.